the topic says the next 5 years. Coincidentally, it has been 5 years for the gaming industry in India. So Subi, what has changed, what has worked, and what has not worked, and what do you expect to work? I mean, it's a long set of questions, but you can break it.
Anushree, hi everybody, and a very good morning. Thank you for bringing us all together. The gaming industry hasn't met and hasn't come together in a while. So I'm really happy that we're here as a group and as a collective. I am amongst friends and colleagues and kindred spirits. Hi Gaurav. People who fought from the trenches, people who've been architects of this journey. It's been a very, very interesting set of 5 years. So these questions are many, but they're intertwined. And it's also a reflection on what can you build. So I see the gaming industry as a greenfield. When you look at numbers, right? So we're second only to another country, a close neighbor, in terms of absolute numbers. About 45 crore gamers in India, roughly equal. So we've been democratic as far as the gender division is concerned, which is very, very heartening for me. When you look at numbers, roughly about a growth of 34% year on year CAGR, which is very, very encouraging given the kind of global shift. And we're living and discussing this in a post-COVID world. So what has worked is the tenacity, innovation, the persistence, and the fact that a bunch of fairly young set of founders and first generation entrepreneurs decided to take on a new challenge where instead of just sending a contingent in esports, and I'll sort of speak about the entire AVGC and gaming sector together. So instead of just sending a participant competing in a medal sport, which is what esports is now, we're now in a position to create new formats. We're now in a position to share, which is something which is very, very critical in today's day and age. We are all living in the age of BTS and Blackpink, right? So if you look at the kind of soft power that Indian stories, Indian storytelling, Indian formats, the evolution and the finesse in characters, whether it's Garuda, whether it's Mahabharat, whether it's Kurukshetra, our own indie formats, right? And then there's an entire world of RMG or pay-to-play formats where people discovered new communities, people discovered new voices, people discovered new groups. And there's a really important book which I strongly encourage this room to read, share. It's called Reality is Broken. So when you looked at the World Economic Forum, they're saying not just climate change, but loneliness is one of the biggest issues that we need to now deal with. So as you looked at breaking down of family structures, as you looked at more nuclear families, the language that we were speaking in, or the younger generation was speaking in, the syntax that they needed to speak in, you were building new communities. So what has changed is over 400 game developer companies, and Dhruv is here and he's from AIGF, the All India Gaming Federation. We've been members for a very long time. They've fought the good fight. They've fought the fight together to not just clear. There are a lot of misconceptions about gaming as an industry, right? So, and for the longest time, there was no clarity when it came to policy, when it came to regulatory environments. The Public Gambling Act was often applied to the sector. So there were many, many challenges, and it's never been easy. So first, before we even get into the discussion, if you've taken away one thing from the last 5 years, it's the spirit of the entrepreneurs and the founders. And it's a very, very lonely journey when you're trying to build something that's new, that is not something that your parents and their parents understand. So the first question was, tum log karte kya ho? Right? Game khelte ho din bhar. What is it that you're doing which is constructive, productive, meaningful? What is the impact that you're going to have on society? So we first needed to distinguish that gaming, even when played with money, is not synonymous with gambling. If that's the one lesson that we take away from here today, it should be that. So when it came to adding number of jobs, over 5 lakh jobs created, when it came to creating value and wealth, you had 2 new unicorns, you had several soonicorns coming out of the sector. But there have been lessons which are learned, and as we get into the discussion, we'll talk about what more should be done, what more can be done, and what is it that we still need to address, which are open issues. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, the task is to little rile up Dhruv a bit. So Dhruv, I'll take context from what Subi said. These are first-time entrepreneurs. Do you think they never saw this coming, like the growth that was there about a year back, the kind of money that was coming in? They were not prepared that finally probably the government will also start looking at them with a fine-tooth comb, and it's not to stop the growth, but it's also to probably give instead of a topsy-turvy growth, give an even growth. One can see it from that light also. So would it be fair to say that they were never prepared for this?
Anushree, firstly, again, very good morning to everyone, and like an August gathering here that you have collected. So thanks for inviting us, and thanks for inviting me to talk besides Subi, one of our mentors from the beginning, correct, when we started our journey. I'm quite young in that sense, and when we were, what Subi said, that we were fighting the good fight. So Subi was one of the persons who sort of led that fight along with Gaurav and a few other people in the sort of the hall. So just taking your question as to whether they could not have seen it or whether they did not see, I think all these entrepreneurs, correct, it's not their job to see this. Correct. What their job was to have immense growth, correct, through innovation, doing things which were not done, correct, creating formats, ways of engagement that was never seen before in India. So let's say if take someone in 2018, correct, creating that new startup. A lot of these other than maybe 2 or 3, a lot of the new ones that you hear about have come in 2017-18, correct? Yeah. In 2018, what was the international market dynamic? It was 23 and 25% between China and US respectively in the gaming market. India was just 1% of the international gaming market. Right now also it's 1.5%, not more than that, correct? Where the world was 150, 180 billion dollars, India was 1.5 billion dollars in 2000, less than 105 billion in 100.5 billion dollars in 2018, correct? So for them, the task was to make India a powerhouse in gaming, correct? And what they did in last 5 years is fantastic, correct? In only two and a half years, they collected $2.6 billion in FDI. They were multiple unicorns, 3 unicorns, 400, as Subi said, 450 million users. That was their job, correct? Yes, it's true that the growth was immense. I don't think so it has anything to do with the growth. The taxation or change in policy, etc., has anything to do with growth. It has to do with perception, or should be said, correct? I think what might have missed is that when people are working on economic growth, on innovation, sometimes they miss that, okay, India is a country where perception matters a lot, where you might be doing great work, but sometimes people might not be able to understand you, correct? And that's where maybe what happened. But again, I would say those entrepreneurs, that was not their job to look into, okay, what perception, etc. is. That they brought a lot of good people later to help them out, and they did what they could do. So I think they did what they were supposed to do. They did it fantastic, correct? And I still think that it's not all bad yet, correct? There's a lot of upside to the industry still, and I think they will come out of it much stronger.
Interesting. Shubi, I'll also take a point from where you talked about gender, and women gamers. I'll agree to the fact that when we also started Gaming Summit, interestingly, right in between COVID, and then we were talking about women gamers, and the first question when we went to the market, they said, profession thodi na hai ye, to bas time pass ke liye khelte. So now when you see how many women gamers are there, and to what extent this profession has become a true profession?
So Anushree, thank you, and I'm so happy that I see a lot of young women in the room today. That's very, very encouraging. So kudos to Indian Express and Financial Express for bringing in a group that has a healthy diversity. There are 2 things which are important. If you look at the evolution of the internet, it's very different from telecom. Telecom is a licensor engagement. There are obligations that you have. When you look at the way the internets work, innovation happens at the periphery. It's called permissionless innovation. So when it comes to building and putting content, understanding the internet, there are over 7 layers of the internet. The engagement that we get with women, where so about 10 years ago, the refrain was the mother of women in the house will be the last to get devices, right? So now you've got women not just getting access to technology. And 2 or 3 things have happened. With the emergence of a new entrant in Geo, the price of data went down. When I used to get picked up for various debates for news channels, I would ask the gentleman who'd come, what do you do? What is your monthly spending on data, right? So it was about 1/10 of what he was earning. From there to now cheaper tablets, now smarter phones getting more accessible, to normalizing the fact that women can have mobile phones and it does not impact culture, it does not impact character. To a lot of conversation, not just about gaming as an industry, but the choices that women are making. And that a lot of credit goes to removing policy paralysis. So roughly about 40% of all gamers in India are women, younger women. And that has meant that you have to constantly start taking your space. You have to express voice, you have to own agency, and which is where the kind of internet or cyberspace that we create, the kind of role models that we have. There are several institutions and investors, and Lumika is doing a great job by calling out 30 game changers. Hangama has done the same thing, right? They're celebrating women who are coming out and taking up space. So the formats are more engaging. There's more representation. And we used to say that across all media, whether it was film, whether it's our newsroom. Not just having representation, but what is the kind of participation, what is the kind of leadership, what is the kind of roles that you're giving to women. So if you have women editors, as the same across panchayats as well, Anushree. So if when you have a woman sarpanch versus a male sarpanch, there's a lot of expenditure on buildings when it's a man. When there is a women sarpanch, we've seen they will spend a lot on human development indices. So there'll be more emphasis on creating a hand pump versus just creating infrastructure. So as you get more characters who are heroes, who are female protagonists, as an equalization happens, and most importantly, as more academic rigor and research comes into online gaming and newer and emerging industries, there you will see a lot more women because it's a safer space. So unlike other professions, you can do this from the comfort of your living room, right? You have peripherals, you have access, and you can be a superwoman from your living room. And what is most interesting is tier 2 and tier 3 towns and cities now creating communities, creating groups, and we've met these women. They're amazing. They're making aam ka achar on the side and they're smashing the buttons, and it's an incredible story. So it's accessible, it's democratic, and it's truly for everyone.
To Dhruv, to you my question is, we have seen things moving in a certain direction in the last 1 year. The next 5 years, what do gaming companies need to do in terms of renovating the business model, in terms of, first of all, clearing the idea that gaming is equal to gambling? Yesterday we saw one of the trends on Google was matka gambling. And as key writers, we wanted to see, is it gaming or is it gambling? And then we saw, okay, it's gambling. So before legal penalizes us, let's just move away from covering it. So yeah, because that mindset is gaming is equal to gambling.
So Anushree, what you have to see is that conceptually and legally at least, the definition has been with us for last 70 years now. The Supreme Court of India on multiple occasions, then multiple high courts, have given a definition where it says that any game whose outcome is predominantly based on skills is a game of skill, correct? Any game which is predominantly based on luck or chance is a game of chance, correct? Any game played with money, which is a chance game, will become betting and gambling. And what Subi said, any game which is game of skill, even if played with money, does not become betting and gambling. So that legal definition is with us. It has been held n number of times that skill games are constitutionally protected. There are fundamental rights which protect it, Article 91G, which allows freedom of trade and business and commerce. So that legal clarity is there. The problem where it comes is that till now, the courts have only looked at very few formats, correct? The formats which are, mind you, which were under dispute, where, for example, if I ask you today whether chess is a game of skill or not, there is no doubt. So chess never went to a court, correct? Yeah. Now if tomorrow someone says, oh, if I play chess with money or without money, it becomes gambling. It never will be, correct? It's a game of skill. So that clarity is there. What might we need is that maybe certain framework, which we were working already and which we hope that we'll be able to work in the future, that translates this definition into an applicable framework where games can be passed in the long run, whether it's through SRB model, whether it's some other regulator, it depends on the government, where it can be passed and those formats can be sort of taken through. Because what has happened is that a lot of people think, oh, it's only the courts that can decide. Courts have laid down the definition. On case-by-case basis, only games wherever there was doubt where their dispute came and they went to court, correct? Otherwise, the definition is very clear. So the next step should be ideally for the industries to focus on a framework where this game of skill and chance can be applied to each and every format, because there can be thousands of new formats that can come in. That's the first, I think, step they need to figure out, talk with the government, further push with them, and sort of have that clarity. So what will happen is once the central government is able to put in place that framework, even the state governments and that this uncertainty around what is skill, what is chance will go away, and then there will be more uniformed sort of application of this differentiation across the board, whether in states or in the center.
No, I think, you wanted
Yeah,
to add that.
yeah. Thanks, Anushree, and thank you, Dhruv. I'll just break this down a little further. So for a lot of us, we don't really know how and when a game gets published. We think that somebody decided to code and decided to put their content online and everyone can use it, and therefore it's not been through any filters or any layers. Gaming industry has not been given enough credit, and I think there's so much more that the industry itself needs to do to tell its story better. So which is where it's a constant task where you need to build bridges, you need to build capacity for regulators to understand, for policymakers to understand. If you're a new sunrise sector, if you're innovating or if you're disrupting, it is incumbent upon the industry equally and our associations to build that capacity. You fail if you're not doing that job properly. So 5 years ago when we started, a lot of people decided to create innovative formats, or they decided to take normal board games or games that you and I played offline, and they decided to create versions of those. As matters started going into court, you saw a lot of children playing games. So what you're looking at is 3 or 4 complex phenomena where, like socialization and education, your parents and your teachers knew far more than children. I've been a Delhi University professor for 5 years, and when I used to teach at LSR, you would always think, what more can I teach? Because these people have information. So if you were not developing critical skill sets, you were failing in your job. Similarly, when games started being made and they started going to court, and the people who had genuine questions saying, "Mera bachcha gambling to nahi kar raha hai," or if it's money is involved, is it going to lead to this becoming an alternative source or my primary source of income? So ASCII came in, ASCII put in rules, which is the Advertising Standards Council. They said you cannot, you need to have a disclaimer, you need to use the same language as your advertisement, you need to be responsible in creating or building your market. Then it said it cannot be your primary source of income. Then these gaming formats, before they go online, if you're a member of an AIGF or an FIFS or an EGF, you need to go to your association, and there are 3 things you need to do. What are 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 innovations that you've done to your gaming format before you decided to take it and publish it, which made sure that there is more skill than chance involved in your format. So what the courts say is, if there is preponderance of skill, and what is equally important is if you can showcase that the final outcome of the game was not based on pure chance. So if the roll of dice alone, and if you need a 6 and you win the game, then the courts say this is not a skill-based game. So these 2 things. Then when it came to frameworks, what we did was, first and foremost, we need to understand there's not a single format of online gaming. Whether it's being played with money or whether it's not being played with money, there are 5 different categories of games. There are hyper-casual games, there are casual games, there are games which are board formats, there are storytelling gaming formats, there are games which are very, very intense, where people have spent millions working with a studio, so those would be your battle royales and PUBGs and Craftons, and we've got Indian variants where 4G was created. Now, how good or bad your game is going to be will be dependent upon the kind of effort that you spent building characters. So it's market dynamics, it's fair competition, it's content. If a film works, it works because it was a great film. It worked really well because you'd spent enough in production values, in casting, in acting, in direction. Similarly, now when it came to deciding whether it's skill or chance, the framework that the industry that Dhruv briefly referred to was 2 or 3 important parameters in addition to what the courts had already ruled. Is your game able to showcase better hand-eye coordination? Can you choose to lose? So if it's a game of chance, and this is very, very important to make that distinction. So if we go out from here a little more educated about what is skill and what is chance, I'd be the happiest person. So if you can deliberately lose a game, then it cannot be a game which is pure chance. So that's called choose to lose. And the second thing that you have to do is over 10,000 sets of data where you showcase that over time there is correlation between my 3-year-old niece not winning a game versus a player which has played the game multiple times. So your skill directly determines the impact of your winnability or your proficiency in a game. The third thing that you also need to do is when you submit a game for approval and you say, I'm a member and I abide by the skill gaming charter, I'll be a responsible company, I will have a separate escrow account, I will not use my players' money for my personal benefit, then what you also need to do is submit the opinion of at least 3 or 2, a minimum of 2 national legal firms who examine whatever you are submitting, the rules of the game, the innovations that you've done in your game, and lastly, how is it that you're showing that this is more skill than chance. Even in chess, no one can say it's pure skill. So that's the difference. And that's the fight that we need to fight. The last bit, Anushree, I wanted to add was, not everything is right. So in every sector, there'll be rogue actors. In every sector, we'll have to do so much more for ensuring that you don't just play lip service to responsible gaming. You're actually a player who's responsible towards its community. You are doing enough and more to educate people. And still, having said that, we need to understand if it was real money games, it was meant for people who were above the years of 18. So it was never meant for children. So the last bit that we've grappled with is people either doing knee-jerk reactions when it came to policy, or gaming becoming the holy ghost you had to slay when it was election season in some states. Or the last bit that we were dealing with was the fact that there was not enough evidence or not enough research had been done, and words like addiction were being used very, very loosely. So thankfully, there are doctors from AIIMS and there are doctors from very renowned institutions like NIMHANS, WIMHANS, who are now working to say, one, we have to use words even like addiction responsibly. B, what do we need to do to create a community that's healthy and that takes away the good parts from gaming and does not just see this as a way of an alternative livelihood. So those are very, very clear distinctions. And every stakeholder must do its part. So the government must engage more, and they've done consultations and they've done a great job, which is why you have MeitY now coming forward and saying we issued the digital media rules and guidelines. And on industry's part, on industry associations' part, on civil society's part, it can't be that we'll paint everyone with a broad brush. So there's more engagement required from all stakeholders. Thank you.
The time's up, but one last question. One line of advice to the gaming entrepreneurs that you have, who are new, who are starting right now, those who have already, but there are some companies who are starting right now.
So I'll go first, and I think it's very, very important to recognize that when you raise money or when you invest in capital, gone are the days when you would think that only marketing or finance or HR are critical functions of building a business. We are now competing with countries. We are not competing with companies. So when we say if a country or country in particular is sending 50-member or 100-member delegations in a room where they're deciding the rules of the game, if you are not at the table, you will be on the menu. So equally important from day one is to have a great co-founder who complements you. If you're a business acumen whiz, have a great CTO. Equally important is to understand that public policy is not just about sending representations. And it is not just about engaging with associations. It is equally important to understand what are the laws that impact you, what are the laws that are likely to impact you, what are the threats that may impact business continuity. Hire professionals who are campaign builders, coalition builders, who understand how large perception campaigns are built, and who understand geopolitics, and who are able to become true business partners. So if there's one lesson that we need to take away is, sales is amazing, marketing is amazing, but if there are policy shifts or if there's policy ambiguity, from day one, start investing in relationships and competent professionals. It can't be working as an afterthought. Thank you.
I'll actually just add something to what Subi said, taking the idea forward. I think, and going back to the first question that you asked, I think what the founders and the creators and the entrepreneurs have to understand is that no matter how good your intentions are, how well your product is performing, you need to react and respond, correct? And sometimes proactively respond to the reality around you, correct? If the society doesn't understand you, make them understand. If the government doesn't understand you, figure out ways what the problems, pain points are and go address it, correct? And as Subi said, hire those right people who can do it. The only thing is, it's the biggest mistake you can make in a high growth and a very sunrise nascent industry is not understanding that there are things beyond the mathematical matrix, the product, etc. There's a society, economics, government, politics around you. Understand that and react to it, and sometimes proactively respond to it before assuming that everything is hunky-dory, correct? And that's, I think, is one of the core ideas that, considering what is happening in the country and across the world, when it comes to policy, when it comes to creating industries. It's not just like creating a company; you have to create industries around your company also. This is something that you need to keep in mind.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Anushree, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Anushree.
For an amazing audience and a wonderful moderator. Please put your hands together for her as well. Thank you.